Okay, so this is a review session for IS 201 Spring Term 2016. I'm Professor Allen. I'll be your host. We've got, this is recorded live before a studio audience, and we are looking at, clap, a little applause, please. We should have a sign applause. And we're doing queries. So queries and access is really what we're after here. So I'm going to start handling this question here, number 13. Calculate the difference between the current salary and the maximum, current salary and the maximum salary. Okay, so this is a calculated field. So let's take a look at this one again. So I'm going to create tab, create in design view, query in design view. I'm going to need the employee table, and we're getting to regional managers. That information's in the position table, and I don't think we need anything about the location, so I think we're okay there. So we've got employee and position here. So what are we supposed to show? Show last name, salary, maximum salary. Let's get these in here first. So we've got last name from the employee table. Now I forgot what they were. Last name, salary, and maximum salary. Salary and maximum salary. Now, maximum salary for a position, the idea behind a position is we say, here's a manager. There's a salary range. Managers get paid from this to this, and doesn't matter how good you are at being a manager, you don't make more than the maximum salary for that position. So that's what we're talking about here. So maximum salary is the maximum salary for whatever position title we're talking about here. All right, so now the trick is we want to be able to calculate. If I just run that right now, we see we got it. Here's Foster, here's his salary. In that particular position, he can only make a maximum of $75,000. So he's got $20,000 that we could work with in terms of promotion and kind of merit pay increase, that kind of thing. Okay, so now what we'd like to see is we would like to see the difference between these two. So calculated field it's not among the simplest things to do in Access because it's not so much point and click. We kind of have to know how to type this one in. And so I'm going to take the name of the fields that I want to use in the calculation. So I've got maximum salary is one of them. And I just want to take the difference between that and the salary. So that's pretty good. Remember that because this field name has a space in it, two things have to happen. Number one, I have to find the person who made this field name and hit him over the head because you shouldn't ever put a space in a field name. But two, because we've got that, we've got to put square brackets around it. And then we can give it a name. The name for this is going to be, what did they say to call it? Salary difference. Oh, don't have to type it. If I can avoid typing, that's better. Salary difference colon. And so that gives me the name for the new field, and then after the colon is what the definition of that field is. And so now I can just copy that, and I can put that right in here, right on the field. The whole calculation goes in here. It's how we're defining the field, and then we should be able to see that whole thing. Okay, so now we see that $20,000 difference here for this particular person, and all these are different. Is this right? Frank's got no room? Yeah. Maximum salary for whatever his position is, and that's where he currently is. So there's no salary difference. Let's go ahead and bring in the position title just so we can take a look at the position title as well. So we're seeing, account representative, 75,000 is the maximum, manager, maximum 150, and so forth. Okay, so now we're not quite done with this query. Name the calculated field. So we're only looking for regional managers. So we're going to change that to regional manager. So position title is regional manager. And then I don't think we're actually showing the position title. So these should only be regional managers now. And apparently we only have two. And $250,000 is the maximum salary. These guys got a way to go. So I think that is the results to this one. As you're looking at that, do you see anything that I've missed? Okay? Okay, any questions on this calculated field? I know we did this yesterday, but I just wanted to start with that because our next example is going to build on this. Okay, so let's look at number 14. I'll go ahead and save this query. Ooh, I'm going to close it and save it. You want to save, I don't want to call it query 11 because I skipped a couple here, so I'm going to go to query 13. Okay. All right, so query number 14, calculate the sum of salary difference and salary. So now we're doing a sum for all positions that have the word manager in them. Okay, so this is a little bit straight. This is different. So for this one, I'm going to start with a little bit simpler of a query. to build it up, because I'm going to introduce the idea of doing sums. That last calculation that we did, you might say, well, it's a little bit, it's kind of the same because it's a difference. Is this what it's asking for? Calculate the sum of the salary difference and salary. Oh, no, they're not. Okay, I'm sorry. This is actually pretty similar to the last one. And I remember watching Professor Keith do this on the video in the book. Let me open up query number 13 again. And I want to file save as. Save this as 14. Save the object as query number 14. Didn't mean to put a slash in front of it. Fiddlesticks. Yeah, you don't want spaces, and you definitely don't want a slash in the name of anything. So, is there a rename? Yeah, rename. Design. Okay, so they're asking us to add up. So we're bringing several things into this query. Calculate the sum of the salary difference and the salary. So we're like just adding these two up together. So once we've created that salary difference field, we should be able to, in another calculated field, say, does it tell us to call the name of it? It doesn't give us a name for it, so we'll give it a name. We'll call it salary difference plus salary. And we should just be able to refer to that newly created field, salary difference, and then add the salary to it. And so, I mean, we're adding the salary difference. We took the salary difference, which was just the maximum salary minus the salary. And now we're taking that thing that we calculated and we're adding the salary back in. So what should this equal? Yeah, this should equal the maximum salary. So it seems like a weird thing to calculate, but you know, we ask you to do weird things in this class, and so don't feel too bad about that. So with the word, now we're looking for the ones, not just regional managers, but we want everyone where it says manager. Oh, I don't think we got introduced to the like operator. Did we do the like operator yesterday? Okay, so this shouldn't be too bad. Like, and then I'm going to put an asterisk. Can you see that up there? I can barely see it on this screen, and I'm really close to it. Okay, now it says to calculate sliders that have the word manager in them at all cities. We're not restricted by city. Also calculate the difference between the newly calculated summed field and maximum salary. Isn't that what we did here? We calculate the difference. That's a really weird thing to do. It would be nice if, you know, when you're reading these, you could go, okay, I get it, that makes sense. Let's run it here and see what we get. Oops, salary difference. So it's not, did I spell it wrong, or am I not allowed to actually refer to it? All right, so let's just go ahead and take a look at this particular field. And it turns out something interesting. So I've got salary difference spelled wrong. I'm missing an E. There's an E that belongs right here. But let's see what happens. This happens anytime I have something misspelled in the definition of a query. It's going to say, oh, you've got something in there that I don't know what it is. And so it says, that must be some value that we're expecting to get from the user. So it'll actually ask, what do you mean for salary difference here spelled wrong? So if I was to put in like $10 for that, then this query would run okay, and it would actually do the calculation. So this should just be $10 more than whatever we had for, see, it was the salary difference minus, anyway, it's plugged in 10 for that calculation. And so that can actually be pretty handy if you can create a parameter then that when you run the query, it asks the user for the value. There's a question over here. Oh, yeah, we'll get to the like function here. I'm going to get this thing calculating, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about the like function right here. Okay, good. So let me put that E in there so that it's spelled correctly. Okay, so now it's done that, and it has pulled this right back out to what that maximum salary was. So we just took the calculated field and added that back in. Let me go ahead and display the title as well. This will help us see what that like function is doing. Okay, so now we can see we've got only positions we have are those that have manager in them. So whether it's just manager or regional manager. So that's what the like is doing. Let's take a look. I'm going to go ahead and write that over here. So it's just a little bit bigger for the recording. So I'll say like, and then in quotes, I say manager. Now, I'm going to say, you know what? I want to find those columns. I want to find those rows where this column starts with anything. So it's a wildcard character. Star says we're going to start with anything, and then we're going to have the word manager, and then we're going to end with anything. And so this will return true. It will return a match anytime the word manager shows up in the position title, because that's where I'm plugging this in. Now this actually brings up an interesting point, and that is, look at the data that we have here. Both of these position titles end with the word manager. And so I could delete that one and it would still execute the same way. Do you see that? So let's just go ahead and do that. I like having this up here where I can see it. Okay, so I'm going to plop this in here. I'm really just changing that star off the end. And you'll see that it brings in exactly the same set of records. Is this still the right answer to this question? What do you think? So here the question says, has the word manager in them? It produces exactly the same result. Is my query still right? The question is, does it matter whether the star is here or not? What do you think? How many of you say, yeah, the star's got to be there or it's wrong? How many of you say, no, it produces the right answer, it's right? Yeah, so in this case, so here's the thing. When we're writing a query, I'm telling you to write the question that the database management system can then process to give us the answer. And that question should produce, the query that I write should produce the right answer regardless of the data that's in the database. So if someone comes along and says, you know what, we're going to make a new position called manager trainee. So it starts with the word manager, but doesn't end with the word manager. Now, at the time when I'm writing this query, whether that asterisk is there or not doesn't affect whether it brings back the same set of records. But if the data gets changed in the future, is this question asking for manager trainee to be included? Yeah, because it says anywhere, it just has to include the word manager. It doesn't say ends with manager, just includes. And so that for this really to be right, I've got to plug that in and get that star, that closing star in there. Now, are we going to be that picky on any exam that we give you? The answer is no. But in terms of kind of the world of querying, it's not enough to say, well, it produces the correct answer. There's other ways I could get at the correct answer, right? I could actually just say, here's the right records. I could say, select all these records where the last name or where the social security number is this or this or this or this. I could produce that right result, but it has nothing to do with whether it's the manager or not. And so you really want to write the query so that it answers the question regardless of the data that's there. There's a question back here? Question mark symbol. So what the question mark symbol does, the asterisk symbol says any number of characters, including 0 number of characters before, and any number of characters after. Question mark says exactly 1 character. So I could actually put a question mark here and it would return the same results. Question mark. Where's the question mark? Oh, here's the question mark. So that's saying, it starts with star, has MAN, has exactly 1 character, and then ends with GER. Let's see if we can actually find an example that would make sense to do that with. Is the space a character? The answer is yes, the space is a character. Oh, would this work?
Yeah, before that.
There's a space. Yeah, okay, let's do that. That's a good question. So let's go ahead and leave the star there, and let's change this one to a question mark. I do have to put the A back, thank you. MANAGER. Okay, so now what I'm expecting this to do is I'm expecting this to now ignore the ones that are just managers because there's no space before it. and this should allow us to pick up the space. And run. Doesn't get anything. Like, oh, that's right, we got to put a star in front of that because I got to get the regional as well. So there's regional, and then that space. So, to do a star, really, or to do a question mark, it really makes sense if you've got, some names that are like close to each other. Sandy, Holly, Emily, H-O-L-L. So Holly and Emily, we could do this with Holly and Emily. Let's just make another query right here so we can see it. Create query in design mode. Look at the employee data. Show everything. We're going to look at the first name. And we want it to be H-O-L-Y. L-Y. So we're looking for like. Let me bring this over where it's a little bit bigger to see. So we're looking for names that have 3 characters followed by ly. What if there's 4 characters followed by ly? Not going to find it. We're looking for exactly 3 characters followed by ly. So we should get Kelly, Holly, Emily. See it? Do we have anyone else that ends in ly that doesn't have 3 in the beginning? That would be nice, so we can show that we don't get them. I'm not sure if we do or not. ly. So we can find that out just by asking for star ly. So if I change this to star ly, we'll see if we have anyone else that starts that same way but ends differently. We do. But no, we don't. It's the same set that we had before. But anyway, that question mark says we're looking for exactly 3, and if there was 4, if there was 4, it wouldn't do it. And that's really what you have to work with in like. You've got like, you have the star, and you have the question mark. All right. Well, we were working on something else. What was it? Okay, number 14. Also calculate the difference between the newly calculated summed field and the maximum salary. That should go to 0, shouldn't it? So that thing was called salary difference plus salary. Let's call it salary difference plus salary minus max salary. Ooh. I'm not sure I can make a field name that long. Colon, and that's going to be salary difference plus salary minus maximum salary. So I have my new one. Why don't I just call this salary 2? That's kind of a long name. I'll call this one salary 2. I'll call it salary 0 because it's going to be 0. Salary difference plus salary, that newly calculated one, minus the maximum salary. Let's try it. So here's maximum salary. Here's salary, maximum salary. There's a difference. Here we're adding the salary back in. And then here we're taking that and subtracting this off. Oh, let's see. And it wants anyone with manager, thanks. So we'll go ahead and make that change. So instead of the question mark, we're going to put that back to star manager star. And now we've got that calculation. So again, why would you do a calculation like this? Because some professor thought this would be a good exercise. You wouldn't ever really do this calculation because you know exactly what these are before you even get to them. All right, but we're going to call that one good. That's query 14. Do you want to save it? Yes, query 14. All right, 15. Create a summary query to display the average and minimum salary of all job positions. Okay, good news. I think the average and minimum salary for all job positions. Okay, so let's start off a little simpler. Let's just look at the employee table. We're going to make a new query. create query in design view. We're looking at the employee table. Okay. And I've got exactly 1 pixel here to catch the edge of that thing to stretch it. Here's what I want to do. I'm just going to bring in the salary. If I run this query, it should just give me a list of salaries. Now, one of the most common things that we need to do is say, you know what? I don't want to see the raw data. I want to summarize that data. I want to see the average. Don't show me each salary. I want to see the average of all these salaries. To do that, it's going to be what we call a summary query. And that means we're going to use what's called an aggregate function. Let me show you how this works. I'm going to come back into design view. And up here, I've got this button that looks like a sum. That's the one I want? Yeah, okay. So this is probably actually extended out on yours. It looks a little bit different here because I'm not, the width is reduced here. But this thing here, totals, is going to add for me a new row down here in my query grid. So watch what happens. I'm going to click it, and I get this total row signed up. Do you see it? Totals comes in. Once I have that totals option in there, on totals, I'm going to change this, and I can actually make this one of these summary functions. I can say I want to see the average. And so now when I run this query, instead of showing me all those 20 lines or so, it's going to show me the average of those numbers. So now I've taken that whole set of numbers, and I've really just squished them down into one row. And I've done whatever summary operation on that I wanted it to do. And so in this case, it was average. I could make it the sum. I want to see what's the sum of my salary. I just changed that from average to sum. And so now, payroll is 1.6 million annually. Okay, so that's the trick. I get the sum, I get the totals, I show the totals row, and once I've got that, I've got this new totals row to deal with. Questions on that part so far? Another one that's kind of common here is to choose the count. I just want to see how many records there are in that group. I can just count them. That's nice. Standard deviation, minimum and maximum. Here's the minimum salary. I could actually do 2 at once. Here, let's do that. I'll do the minimum, I'll do the maximum, I'll do the average, and I'll do the sum. I'll do the average and sum. So now here's the minimum salary, 18,000, maximum salary, 175. Average is 62,000, and the total is 1.6 million. So, I can do as many of those as I want. Each one will give me a different one, but I'm collapsing that set of records down into a single row. And I can do multiple summarizations, but it's going to give me a single row. So this is pretty easy, don't you think? Yeah, it's not too bad. Okay, it's going to get harder. Let's take a look. So now, here's what I'd like to do, is I would like to say, you know what, I'm just kind of interested to see what kind of differences we have based on gender. And so I'm going to add in my gender column. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to sum gender. Maybe I should count gender. Let's just count gender. So count of gender is 24. Does that mean I have 24 different kinds of genders? What does it mean? I have 24 non-null values in my gender column. It's just counting how many values there are. So they're all, what are they, male and female? Yes, they're all M and F, but is it counting this one? Let's see. There's 25 rows, but I've got one where we don't know what the gender is. Tracy Coulter. What do you think? Male or female? Yeah, it could go either way. So, but you see the difference here? When I'm counting the gender, there's 25 records, but because there's no value here, that one doesn't get counted. So you have to be careful when we're counting. You're counting how many values there are in that column. So what column should you count if you want to count the number of records, regardless of whether there's values or not? Which of these columns should I count? Is there any one of these columns that has to have a value for that record to be a valid record? Social Security number, because it's the primary key. Access is not going to let me have a blank value on the primary key. And so you can always count the primary key, and you'll know you're counting the number of records. Ooh, what did I do? Design? I didn't want to do that. Well, that's the table. Go away, table. Okay. Here's the other thing you can do. Instead of counting a particular column, you can count. Oh, you can't count star. You got to count I guess you got to count the primary key. Okay, but that's not what I don't. It's not what I do. It's not what I want to do anyway. What I want to do here is I want to set up groups. So I'm going to make this into a group by column. So what I'm saying here is instead of collapsing this down into this whole set of records down into one record, and I've summed them all, I want to collapse it down into the number of values that I have in my gender column. How many values? Well, how many values do I have in my gender column? Yeah, 2 or 3. That's kind of a tough question. Technically, I only have 2. I've got 2 values and I've got null. But null is going to be its own group here. So what it's going to say is this is now going to tell me, okay, you want the minimum, maximum, average, and sum? Great, I'll do that. But because I have this column set as groups, it's now going to give me 3 rows. It's going to say, okay, here's minimum, maximum, average, and sum for men. Minimum, maximum, average, and sum for women. And then minimum, average, maximum, and sum for null. Yeah, for Tracy. So let's run that. And so here's what we see. So we should see that since there was only one record where the gender was null, these are exactly the same. Minimum, maximum, average, sum, it's all exactly the same. But for women now, we have a lower minimum salary, we have a lower maximum salary, we have a lower average salary. We have a higher sum. Why do we have a higher sum? Oh, it's lower too? Oh yeah, it's lower too. It's quite a bit lower. Yeah, so it sounds like we practice gender discrimination here at Gold Star. They're probably, this is a lawsuit waiting to happen. This is a lawsuit waiting to happen. Okay, but you see what the group by does. The group by says, normally when I do this summary operations, it squishes everything down to one row. If I have a group by, it says, okay, we're going to make groups based on the distinct values in that row. Got it? It's really powerful. Okay, so that's the background. Let's see if we can understand what question number 15 is asking. Create a summary query to display the average and minimum salary for all job positions. Okay, so we're not, so you see how that job position now is going to be our group instead of gender? So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Let's go back to design view. I'm going to get rid of the gender column. And what are we after for? We're after only the average and minimum. So minimum, maximum is gone, sum is gone. Okay, but we got to get the job position. And presumably they want the position name, not just the position number. Position ID would give us the position number, so I'm going to have to bring position in here. And I'm going to bring in position title. And that's going to, group by is the default here. So that should do it. It should create groups. It's not really required. Oh, I guess it is. Display job position, so it wants the position first. Average and minimum. So I did those exactly backwards. And we'll move that over. Okay, there's a question. What's the question? So I missed it.
Yeah, so you want the salary, find the salary by the query, or do you want to use salary?
Okay, so what it's asking for here is, I think what this query is asking, tell me if you agree, it's saying, I want a list of all the different job positions I have, and for that job position, I want to see minimum and average salary for that job position. Next job position, minimum and average salary. Is that what you think it's saying? Okay, so that's what I've written here. Now, have I understood your question?
I don't know.
That's what I don't know. Try it again.
So here you have
Oh, I see. You're looking over here. Yeah. This is the minimum salary. Okay, yeah, good point. Okay, so minimum salary, what does minimum salary mean? Yeah, so what it means is there's a lower boundary. If we hire someone into the manager position, there's a lower boundary that we're allowed to charge them. And that's what that means. And so what we're looking for here is so now that we've got that info, let me see if I'm reading this the same way. Create a summary query to display the average and minimum salary of all job positions. Yeah, it's not clear. This really is not clear as to which one it's talking about. That's a really good point. I think it makes more sense for this to be talking about the actual salary, the average of all of the salaries, because the reason is because average to have the average salary, I've got to be talking about this. I'm averaging this one. There's no ambiguity about that one. Now, it could be that it wants the average of this salary and the minimum salary for that job position. I don't think that's what it's asking. So, if someone had given me this instruction, they want this data for whatever reason, what am I going to do? Yeah, go and ask them. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to give both interpretations. Right? I'm gonna do both, and I'm gonna send them back to him because this person's already probably been waiting a day or two before I ever got around to doing it. And for me to go back and say, hey, which one do you want? Don't do that. Say, could be this one, could be this one. Produce them both, send them back, and say, hey, wasn't quite sure what you meant. Here's the answer to one possible interpretation. Here's the answer to another possible interpretation, and then go ahead and do that. So, could you do that on an exam? Yeah, you totally could. I mean, if you got this question on an exam, that's exactly what you should do. Write it one way. If you have the time. If you don't have the time, write the best way that you think and then move on. And if you have time at the end, come back and say, I'm going to write an alternate answer to this because I think it's unclear. And that's fabulous, right? And even if you get it wrong, the one that you put as Q15, but you've got Q15A in there as an alternate interpretation, you come back to the TA and said, you know what, I thought this was unclear, and so I wrote them both. And apparently the one you thought it was this, and then you're in great shape. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. Other option, I guess, you could ask during the exam, which one does this mean, and that's fine too. Go ahead. Let's run this, and then let's try to answer that question. But you're right. We could add another group column and create more groups. So let's go ahead and run this one. I think this is what it's after. Run. So what we have here is. So this is the minimum salary that's actually paid for an account representative. Now, the minimum salary for account representative, the minimum salary we're allowed to pay is probably a different number. It shouldn't be higher than this. It should be something lower than this, lower than or equal to any of these values here. Okay, but now the question is, hey, could we add in gender here and look for gender inequality at the position level? The answer is yes. Let's take a look. So if I was to bring gender back in, it comes in as a group by. I'm going to move it over here in the very beginning. So we'll have position titles, and then we'll have the gender, and then we'll have the values. We'll take a look at it. So now my groups are for every possible combination, not every possible combination, but for every different kind of row we have for this. So what does it mean when I don't have there's no female row for regional manager? What does that mean? There's no female regional managers. Yeah. And so, but we have male and female reps here, and it looks like, just as we expected, the men are getting paid more. In managers, well, apparently we have gender inequality for those who are genderless because they've got a lot of money. They're making a lot. But we're going to ignore Tracy on this one. And yeah, we're seeing the same thing. Men are getting paid more at the manager level. Men are getting paid more at the trainee level. Across the boards, men are getting paid more. Okay, yeah, so that's a good question. So if I have multiple group by columns, it says, all right, what's the different combinations that I've got in my data for those values, and it will do the summary at that level. Okay, that's really what it takes for group by. For anytime we're doing summary calculations, we have to make it into a summary query by showing the totals, and then we have to decide what we're going to include. You have group by, or you've got the aggregate function. There's one more kind of thing we can do over here, and that is we could say, we only want to see those that have a gender. And so we could come in here and we could I think I may have to. We could say we only want to do those that were hired before the year 2000. So we come in here and say hire date, and we'll change this to a where expression. So this is only here to support a where clause. And then we could come and say this is going to be less than. By the way we specify dates is by putting pounds around them. So instead of quotes, we use the pound sign, less than 1/1/2000. And so now, what this does is it says, hey, before we start doing any calculations, we're going to figure out which rows we're talking about. Which rows are we talking about here? Only those employees that were hired before January 1st, the year 2000. From there, we do the summarizations. So that's really important. The restriction with a where clause happens before any of the summarization happens. And so now we should be able to run that. And we've got different numbers. We have different accounts. So apparently a bunch of the other things that we had in here, all of our trainees were hired after. That makes sense. You don't hire someone last century and have them still be a trainee. That's a long training period, I guess. Okay, so that's the other thing we can do here is the where. Questions on that summary stuff? That's a lot of stuff to bite off in one query. Let's go ahead and finish this off by doing exactly what it said. So it's not talking about hire date. It's not talking about gender. I think that's the question that we're asking for in number 15. So I'm going to close and save. Do you want to save it? Yes. I'm going to call it query 15. We got query 15. All right, query 16, create a crosstab query. Whoa. Create a crosstab query to display the average salary of all location cities by position title. Whew. So far, our columns have been columns. When we create a query, we're going to bring some columns in. If we're going to have a column, we had two ways to get it. One was we said, just pull a column out of a table and put it here. The other way was to say, well, let's take some of our columns and let's add them together or do some math on them and we'll make a calculated column. What we're about to do here is really weird because we're going to take now the values from one, we're going to look at one column and say we want the values from this column and we want to take the values out of that column and make those into columns. It's a really neat thing to do, but it's a really different way to think. So let's take a look at how we do it. So we're going to create a new query, create a query in design view. And what are we after here? Crosstab query, average salary of all locations. Okay, so we need salaries in our position. We know the average salary. Salary is going to be an employee. And then position is going to have in position, and we want by city, we want them all. We don't want much, we just want it all. Okay, so we've got our data here. Crosstab query. Okay, so the way we see a crosstab query is that so far, so when we're in the design tab here on the query, so far everything we've been doing has been a select query. Why do we call it a select query? We call it a select query because we're just selecting records. And when we come to structured query language view, we'll see the keyword in SQL is select. That's what gets us going with this kind of statement. And so that's the kind of query that we've had. We can have queries that create a new table. We can have queries that add records into an existing table. We can have queries that change the values in a table. And we can have queries that delete records out of a table. Or we can have what's called a crosstab query, and that's what this one is, creating a crosstab query. Now watch again that when I click this crosstab query, it's going to give me a new row down here in my query grid. It's giving me this both a crosstab and a total row. It's showing up down here now. And so now when I bring columns into my query, I've got to think about it in terms of their crosstab as well. So here's what we want. We want to create a crosstab query to display the average salary of, so average and salary. So let's bring in salary. So we need salary down here. Now this is one that we're going to summarize, and so that's going to be here in our totals row. We're going to make this into a average. So if I was to run this right now, I would just see one number that's the average of all my salaries. Okay, but now I want crosstab query, average of salary for all location cities. Okay, so I need the location city. Here's location, location city. Now, this one's going to be a group by. And actually, let's do this without making a crosstab query. We're going to make this a crosstab query again in just a second. We've got we want to group by location, city, and we want to group by position. Is that right? Position title. So we got position title down here. Position title. Normal group by query. So if I run this, what I should see, I'm going to move the salary over here to the end. What I should see is, I should say, okay, for a particular city, I want to see what we're paying in each position. Okay, so this is pretty good. For Atlanta, we've got account representative, manager, and trainee, and that's the average that we're currently paying in those positions. In Boston, we've got these. In Chicago, let's see, it looks like Denver doesn't have as many positions. Why not? What are we missing? No trainees in Denver. Oh, Boston doesn't have any trainees either. What does it have? Boston has a regional manager, whereas Atlanta doesn't. But I've got all the data here, right? So this is the average salary for account representatives at Atlanta. Okay, now what a crosstab query allows us to do, it's going to be exactly the same data, but it's going to say, look, instead of making these two different columns, and we've got all of the salary information in one place, we're going to take one of these, position title, and we're going to make it into rows, and then we'll have an intersection between a city and a position title, and in that grid, we'll put the number. That's what a crosstab query does. It doesn't give us any new information here, it just changes the way that we're showing that information. So let's take a look at making that change. So I'm going to make it into a crosstab query, and now I've got to tell it here on this crosstab, I now get to choose if I want this to be a row heading, a column heading, or the value that's showing in the middle of the table. So for my row headings, I think I want to show my location cities down the side. So I'll make that a row heading. My position table is going to go across the column heading. And then my salary is going to be the value. My average salary is going to be the value that's shown in the table. So now I've got my cities down the side, and I've created new columns out of the data that's in the position title column. And so now, in the intersection between a manager and a city, I've got that data. You see how it's exactly the same information? It just says, what's the average salary for managers in Boston? That's still there. It's just organized differently for me to look at. One of the really nice things about this is that now it really shows out, hey, where do we not have any positions, right? So Atlanta doesn't have any regional managers. Miami doesn't have any trainees. Salt Lake City doesn't have any account representatives. That's what a crosstab query is. Again, we're summarizing data, so it's like a summary query. But in this case, we're just changing it to be a grid instead of just a list. Question in the back? How do you decide which is the column and which is the row? And the answer is by picking it right here. I mean, that's how you set it, but I guess you're asking what's the right way to choose one? And if it's a question, if it doesn't tell you, then you can pick whichever one you want. In practicality, typically you've got more room vertically than you have horizontally, and so you'll pick the one with the fewer values, the fewer distinct values to be in your column headings, and the one with more to be in your row headings. Oh, sort by city, then by title. So these are these going to be sorted? I don't think these necessarily come in sorted, do they? Atlanta, Boston. Yeah, those are sorted. Account manager. Yeah, they're sorted automatically. And so the sort here, I don't think I can control that. Well, maybe I could. Maybe I could make it descending. Let's try. I've never tried. So we can come to sort. Let's just try to put it in descending order and see if that puts it in reverse order. It does. Yeah. So the default when you're making a crosstab query, it's going to sort it for you automatically. Because it has to organize all the data, it's going to sort it. So probably would be safe to come in here and say, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and sort both of these, but they're going to be sorted anyway. Question here?
Now, say we wanted numbers of values.
Okay, so what if we want an average salary and a maximum salary?
Like, will it create numbers?
Let's come down here, salary. We're going to change this from group by to maximum salary. And we're going to make this a value. The answer is I don't know. I do this kind of analysis usually in Excel. It's a little more flexible in Excel. Create a crosstab query, no more than one. You got one of each. And so you can't do it. Make two queries. One for salary and one for value. And of course, in Excel, this functionality is called a pivot table. Did you do pivot tables in 110? maybe just a tiny little bit. Yeah, in pivot tables, you have a lot more flexibility in Excel. And so the crosstabs here, it's nice for doing simple things, but if you need more complex analysis, export the data to Excel and do it there. Question in the back. What it looks like is that you only get to have 3 columns that you have. You could have another columns in here for restriction, but you get to have 1 column heading, you get to have 1 row heading, and you get to have 1 value. And so your column heading and your row headings, they're going to be sorted. It's going to sort them by in ascending order by default. And so it doesn't really make sense to say, we're sorting by 2 things because O is going to be sorted, O is going to be sorted. Question here?
We know it sorts automatically. We have
So the question is, hey, for grading purposes, should we tell it to sort anyway, even though we know it's going to sort? And the answer is, it wouldn't hurt you. It certainly wouldn't hurt you to do that. And I'm pretty sure, just knowing a little bit about the way this query gets executed underneath the hood, I'm pretty sure it really is always going to come out sorted. But if you haven't told it to be sorted, you can't be too upset if someday it comes back not sorted. So you probably should go ahead and say, yeah, these should be sorted. I've never seen one not sorted. All right, what was that, number 16? Other questions on this crosstab? Yes?
sort by ascending.
So the question is, well, what if I wanted to have, instead of alphabetically sorting by oh, that's an interesting question.
Seems like it would make more sense to sort them.
Yeah. So, what if I want to show all my managers first, and then if I want to see manager, it's hierarchical.
Yeah.
There's regional manager, then there's manager, and then there's sales, and then there's trainee. There's sales, what is it? Sales rep, I don't remember. So, I'm not sure about that. Let's just give it a shot. So let me come to position, and I'm going to bring in the position ID as a surrogate for that. It may or may not actually be right, but let's just take a look. So it's not. So this number is QRST. Okay, so we will be able to tell the difference here, because if I sort by position ID, it should flip trainee and regional manager. Let's just see if we can do that. In which case, what we would need to do is we'd have to have a column over here that establishes the hierarchy. Oh, we could probably do it by the maximum salary. Maximum salary should be, they should go in descending order. So let's try it by maximum salary and see if we can get that to work. And like I say, as I say, I'm not sure that we can do that. So position, I'm going to bring in maximum salary. I'm not going to sort on position title at all. And I'm just going to see group by. That should be okay to group by that. It's not going to add, because each one of my positions has only one maximum salary. It's not going to create any new levels of grouping. And so I'm going to come here and I'm going to try to sort by this. I don't know. Let's see if it does it. It did something weird. It created those groups differently. Yeah. So it looks like we're not going to have that flexibility. So you get to sort by what's there. All right, I think that's the answer to number 16. Let's close, save, and I'm going to call it number 16. 17. List all employees, first and last name, who were hired after. Okay, I got to tell you, folks, when I get to number 16 and it's a crosstab query and it's pretty hard, I'm expecting number 17 to be pretty hard too. I'm getting to number 17 and I'm going, list all employees. There's got to be some trick here. List all employees who were hired after January 1st, 2000. My guess is what we haven't done so far is I think this is where the assignment used to end. And then someone said, you know what, we haven't talked specifically about dates before this. And so we got to have something here that gives us experience with dates. We talked about dates just a minute ago, but this query is so quickly, will be so fast to write. Let's go ahead and write it. Query in design view, employee. I thought I said to bring the employee in. Apparently I missed it. Employee. Okay, I want to see first and last name who was hired after January 1st, 20,000 or 2000. Yeah, 20,000. That's a long time from now. So first name, last name, hire date, and the hire date is just greater than 1/1 2000. Now, my guess is that Access is going to look at that and go, oh, that's a date. We've got to properly do that. We've got to properly put Pound signs. Yeah, we see some finger crossing here. Let's hope it does it. I won't have to remember that pound sign if it does it for me automatically. And it does. It looked at that and said, that's a date. Put the pound signs in. Now, most database management systems won't do that. It'll look at that number and go, oh, I can figure that out. 1 divided by 1 divided by 2,000. And that's going to be some number. Dates are all internally stored as numbers. It's going to be some number. It's not going to be January 1st, 2000. It'll be some number. It's probably going to be January 1st, 1900. Or it will be January 1st, 1970. Different systems use a different date as the initial date, and they count forwards and backwards from that. So that's one thing you do have to be careful. Database system can look at that and go, yeah, that's just math. In this case, it puts the dates in for you. We'll run that. There, we've got it. So we're going to go ahead and save this one. We're going to call it query number 17, and we're good. Last one. What percent of employees hired between and including these dates have an average or good performance rating? You can perform the percentage calculation by hand after. Oh, yeah. Actually, I did this with a student yesterday, and actually writing the query that does this percentage calculation at the end, it's a really complex thing to do. But this first part we can do okay. What percentage of employees? So what I want to see is I want to see the employees who were hired between this date and have this one of these two ratings. Create query InDesign employee table. I guess I'm just going to put the social security number first and last name. Ultimately, it's just asking for a single number. But now, we have a call from the remote location. Hello, son, I'm teaching class right now. Okay, I'll call you back later. Thanks, bye. Maybe I should put that on mute. Okay. All right, so we want to know the hire date, and we want to know something about the performance. Okay, performance is easy here, right? We can just come in here and say good or average, G-O-O-D, or average. We've got to have quotes around those, but Access is going to put those quotes in for us. How nice. Now, the thing that that I think it wants us to do here is that we could say where the date is greater than or equal to January 1st, 1995, and the date is less than or equal to May 9th, 2005. But there's a slick little notation that lets us do that a little bit easier, and it's called the between operator. Here's how it works. Between. I give it some date, in this case 1/1/1995, and some other date. In this case 5/9/2005. The thing I don't really like the between syntax just because this word and means something different here than it normally does. And typically means I've got something that evaluates a true or false on this side, something that evaluates a true or false on this side, and says they both got to be true for the thing to be true. In this case, it gets paired up with this between and it's specifying a range. But the nice thing about this is that these numbers are inclusive on between. So if it starts with this date and ends with this date, then that's exactly what we're looking at. I should be able to drop that into the hire date. And run the query, and we've got what we're looking for. And so this is really telling us that we have 9 records. So there are 9 employees that meet these criteria. So at this point, I just got to know I got 25 records. Take 9 divided by 25. That's the percent that we're looking for. Okay. So but I think the whole point for number 18 is just to introduce this between syntax. Questions here? In the back? The question is, does it include the people hired on this date? And the answer is yes. Between is inclusive. So that brings them in. Question? It didn't. In fact, it didn't ask for any of this data. Ultimately, it wants a percentage. It's asking for a number. So I just brought this information in. I had to put something there. I need to get the number. What I'm really after is the number of records.
When you put percentage, does it
Okay, so maybe what you're suggesting here is I could have one query that counts these, and then I could have one query that counts them all, and then takes this number divided by this number. And the answer is yes, I can do that. And if you want me to blow your minds today, we can write one query that does that. You want to see it? Some of you are nodding, and I'm not sure it's because you're falling asleep or it's because you really want to see that. Okay. It turns out that I cannot do this just with the query editor. I've got to go into structured query language to do this. So let's go ahead and do it. I'm going to change this to give me the count instead of actually bringing back the record. So we can make that change here. We'll go ahead and do that here in Design View. So instead of showing all of this data, what I want to do is I just want to count my Social Security number. I'll get rid of first and last name. I'm not going to show the hire date or the employee performance information. I'm going to change this into a summary query, and I'm going to make this, these are going to be where clauses. So these are just for restriction, and then this is going to be the count. That should show me 9. Let's have one destination field. Total. I want the count. I think I have that. There we go. So that's giving me 9. So this is now telling me, how many employees meet that criteria. All right.
That percentage run out of, it's not run out of volume, just employees are.
Oh, good question. What percentage of employees hired between this and the have a good, oh, yeah. Okay, you're right. So you're right. I was thinking that we were comparing this to how many employees in all. Yeah. In this case, what we want to know is okay, so this is one of the numbers that we need. Whew. Yeah, this actually makes it even a little bit harder. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to
just take a good average.
Yep. All right. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to set this part aside. I'm going to come into SQL View. I'm going to copy that, and this is the structured query language for that query. I'm going to set that aside and just leave it there for a moment. Come back to Design View. I think I'm going to come back to Design View. Okay, now let's do the other one. So this is going to be all the people I'm considering is get rid of this. I'll view that. There's 12. Take that into SQL View. I've got now two queries here. One that gives me each one of those numbers. Whew. Now you can see here that the way that it writes this out is it says, okay, it's selecting the count of Social Security number, and then it's giving it a name as count of SSN. So this first query is giving me, this is giving me my good or average. So this is I'm just going to call this as good. I'll call it as ABG good, ABGOOD, ABGOOD. And this one I'm going to calculate as total, Okay, trouble is I can't run two different queries at the same time. I've got to do something to convert these into one query, to give me back one result. Whew. So here's what I'm going to do. It turns out I am not showing this to you to teach you how to do this. This is way beyond what I would expect you to be able to do. So just sit back and enjoy the show. Don't try to understand this 100% at this point. This is like a mind-melting thing. It turns out instead of just selecting from a table, I can select from another query. Let me just do that in a baby step. I'm going to take this whole thing, I'm going to write another select statement out here. Select star from. Select everything from, opening a parenthesis, I'm going to get rid of that semicolon there and close a parenthesis. I'm going to give this a name. I'm just going to call this A. I have to give it a name. Well, I do in some environments. I'm not sure if I have to do an access. I'll run that, and that should bring me exactly the same thing. But I've added that other select count around from it. So once I do that, select star from this, comma, whoops, got to give it a name, A, and this one as well, B. Whew. So now I'm selecting everything from both of those. This actually does what's called a Cartesian join, and it's kind of rare that you want to do this, but because there's only one record in each one, it'll just bring them onto the same row. So now I've got my 9 and I've got my 12. I should be able to, instead of selecting that, instead of selecting star, I should be able to select ABGood. Here's the name of it. If we look at these columns, this one's called ABGood, this one's called total. I should be able to come here and say I want to select ABGood divided by total. And since we're looking for a percentage, I'm going to go ahead and multiply it by 100. Times 100 as percent employee something. Percent emp. We'll take this back into SQL view, and I'll replace that with the other one that we have. And I must hit copy again. So let's come here and copy it. Back into design view, delete it, and paste it. 75%. Okay, raise your hand if you're going, mind blown. Yeah, so we're not expecting you to do this. But the point is, Access is really powerful. And in fact, this, in terms of the world of database queries, this is not so bad. They can get huge. Whew. I mean, the big thing here, it's only one table. We could be doing kind of huge multi-table things and then say, that's one number. Some other multi-table thing, that's another number. Let's bring them together and do the math. Okay, you asked for it. Now, how many of you are wishing, I wish I had never seen that? No one's saying that. Okay, other questions on querying? Yes? Yes. Can I make it say the percent sign? Yeah, that's actually really easy here because all I have to do is take this whole thing and then concatenate on a string percent sign. I think that, well, I'm not sure. This might be plus. Let's try plus. My best guess is plus there. I think plus will work. You guys are getting greedy now. You want the percent sign. Let's try the ampersand. So sometimes in database management systems, so what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to take a number value and I'm trying to glue that together with a string value. And in most database management systems, you're going to have to actually expressly tell it to convert that number into a string before it'll let you do this. Yeah, there's going to be some function that does that. I'm not sure what it is in structured query language for Access. But I'm hoping the ampersand will do it. It may not. There it is, 75%. Something else? Yes, go ahead.
Well, this isn't directly related. But if for queries in general, data changes.
Oh yeah. So here's the question. Let's suppose that the data right now it's 75%. Let's go modify the data and see what happens. So I'm going to close this query. Call it query 11. No. Oh, wait, do I want to save it? I want to save it. Whew. Almost lost the whole thing. Well, I had it over here, so it wouldn't have been a big deal. I'm going to call it crazy query. Crazy query. That's a crazy query. Boy, I wonder if, okay, so what was the question? Oh, now let's say the data changes. So let's go change something. Let's go take someone who was hired in that date range, and I'm going to change their evaluation. I'm going to come to employee. I want to find someone who was hired after 95, but before, so this guy's here, that's an average. So if we change this one to poor, that should change the number, right? This person goes from being in the numerator and the denominator to only being in the denominator of that problem. Is that right? He's January 1st, and we're talking about 95. Yes, I think that should do it. All right, so I've made the change in the data. I'm just going to open up my crazy query, and now it has changed it automatically. No update necessary. Now, if this query were open, and I made that change there, it wouldn't update it until I closed it and opened it again, or until I went to design view and opened it again. It's got to know to run the query again. But I don't, once the query is written, it really is just a question. And when I open that query, Access looks at the query, and it uses the data to answer the question. So every time you open that query, it's doing all the calculations it takes to come up with the number. It doesn't save the number at all. Whew, other questions? How many? You want me to count them? It goes forever. Yeah, I mean, it's 2/3. That's just a decimal representation of 2/3.
How many is it?
It holds that many. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I've got 13 digits past the decimal. Yeah, it's guessing. I mean, it's fudging here. It really does go on forever and ever. Okay. Anything else? Very good.